Hi there and welcome. My name is Derrick Feldmann and I'm the president of Achieve, a research company that performed the Millennial Running Study this year. And we're excited today to unveil to you, the media and research partners, our early findings from our quantitative components of the study. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Amy Thayer, the head of research at Achieve, who will also be discussing with you some of the health and fitness components that were part of the study in general. Today's a half-hour session together, so we're going to provide highlights of the study throughout the next 30 minutes. The full embargoed copy can be provided and has, I believe, been provided to you earlier. If not, please do let us know towards the end of the webinar. Today, we won't be accepting questions given the short amount of time, but please, if you do have any questions related to the study, its findings, or any information that you would like to discuss with regards to releasing the information, please do follow up with the email that has been provided to you too. We will be debuting the Millennial Running Study at Running USA conference later this week, so that's an opportunity there. In addition, where myself and Dr. Amy Thayer will both be presenting not only the key findings here, but also be participating in a panel to discuss the findings this year too. We are recording this, so if you do miss anything, don't worry, we'll provide the recording to you too as well towards the end. So in this report, what we decided to do is look at how this generation, those in the ages of 20 to their early 30s, primarily 31 in particular, the millennial generation, how these runners view and participate in events overall. Now, this is a different and unique study in that this study doesn't take into account any of the fun runs or different types of events and activities that we also are beginning to see in popularity. In particular, this particular research study is focused on those running events in which that we look at are those that are defined as public organized run-walk events overall. So as we talk about today's research findings, please keep that in mind. Of course, towards the end, we'll offer some conclusion pieces where we do think replicating this type of study for different events and activities in the running event world is very important too as well. The research was conducted in a unique phase in which that we recruited 16 research partners to disseminate the quantitative research study to their participants of their events. These are individuals that had completed those run, race, walk events in particular. These 16 research partners were selected and chosen based upon the number of millennial participants that were in there, based upon geography and demographics, of course. And so this sample size includes research partners from all throughout the United States in general. From the research partners, we had 15,631 total respondents who were born in that category that I was talking about. We did have more female than male, and which is consistent with all other research studies that we've seen in here, including the running population as well. In addition to that, we also would note that we did have a high percentage, of course, of white as compared to other demographics. And we do note that in the study that this has also been consistent upon other studies that are looking at millennial runners and the demographics and ethnicity of that particular niche group and what that represents. Therefore, we do recognize that in this case, it isn't necessarily a national representative sample of the millennial population. That's because the millennial running population is more consistent with what you see here. Other highlights, as you can tell, single, never married, close to 50%, and employed full-time at the 80% percentiles. Most of them earning between that very large amount, 50 to 150,000, with those being towards the top at the higher end of that cap of the age group. And then as we also see too, at least half of them, close to half of them earning a bachelor's degree. What we're going to do now over the course of the next 25 minutes is take you through three primary segments of information that we found most compelling and information that you should understand. Those categories include health and fitness, experience, and then philanthropy. At the end of that, we'll do a conclusion. And for the first two segments, I'm going to invite Dr. Amy Thayer here to discuss some of the key findings from the health and fitness as well as the experience components. Dr. Thayer.
Thank you. So a commonly held notion about millennials is that they are interested in health and fitness and being physically active. And that finding was no different based upon the findings of this study in particular. And so what we found is that although this particular sample had been running just a short period of time, about 50% reported that they had been running from between 1 to 5 years. Nearly 65% indicated that they were either frequent or fitness runners, followed by 18% that said that they were serious competitive runners. And so we can see that this particular sample was really engaged in running, and as a result, nearly 3/4 also reported that they participated in running throughout the year. And so this translates into really, they consider themselves healthy and fit because nearly half consider themselves in very good health, followed by nearly a quarter, 24%, indicating that they had excellent health. And so what all of these findings mean together is that it's not surprising then to see that nearly 3/4 consider themselves both a healthy weight and fit. And then when you break it down further, the percentages that consider themselves an unhealthy weight, if you will, either overweight, underweight, or obese, as well as out of shape, nearly a quarter of them indicated that they were continuing to work to improve their fitness. So either maintaining or improving their fitness was one of the key findings of this study. And then that is further maintained if you look at the top 2 out of the 3 reasons for them being motivated to participate in running events. It's again to improve, either increase their fitness or decrease their weight, or to either maintain their fitness and maintain their weight, followed by a third place ranking of to run in a unique environment or to have an interesting experiential race or running event.
Yeah, so when we see the health and fitness, Dr. Amy Thayer will point out some of our key takeaways here. But in general, this population very healthy and fit. In addition to that, that being their primary driver for participation, right, Amy?
That's correct. That's correct. And I think a key takeaway is really that they love to run and challenge themselves in these different kinds of events. Physical fitness and being active is one of the key findings that we took away for why they do in fact participate. And so why is that important? You really want to consider that the millennial runner in this particular sample is looking for ways to either further or increase their health and fitness goals above everything else. And we'll see that in the subsequent sections of this study. And finally, our last recommendation for maybe event directors would be really to focus on the opportunity to allow these participants to be physically active, maybe push themselves beyond the limits that they can normally do outside of a running event.
Right, and that kind of goes into the experience piece, as we mentioned here, that a lot of the millennial runners participating in our study, the 15,000, view this physical fit and healthy fitness environment as one of the key top factors in which they're also making decisions, correct?
Absolutely, top 2 factors.
Yeah. All right, so now we want to move into the experience section. And in this section, we looked at and analyzed how the experience of the event itself was favorably or disfavorably with millennial runners.
Yes, and more specifically, we look at the type of running event, the length of the running event, as well as the costs of the running events, not only for the participant in that event, but also for the spectators and supporters that they may bring along with them to support them during the event. And so as you can see here, the purpose of this slide is really just to show that in general, half marathons were the most popular events that folks had frequently participated in during the past 12 months, followed by a 5K and a 10K. And those 3 races actually, those 3 events are actually the ones that the sample indicated that they would be most interested in running next year too, and the years after that. And as you can see, just as a side note, the marathon pretty much stays stable across time. And so I think you can see that those are marathoners, but the general sample of millennial runners were particularly interested in that half marathon down to the 5K.
And something here to note, as we had mentioned earlier in this webinar call, is that the fun run and untimed runs is not an area that we study, but we did ask questions about that. As you can see here, with only 23% finished in the past 12 months, although we do see a higher percentage of interest going forward.
Yeah, and I think that particular finding lends itself to things that running event directors may be able to bring in elements of that into events in the future. Okay, so as we look at this slide, really, it was very interesting. As we know, the millennials are what we refer to as digital natives. They're very savvy with social media, and that was no different in this particular investigation either. Most of the millennials indicate, and we'll follow up on this in subsequent slides, but most of them indicated that they learn about a race an event through social media. And that was then followed up by internet searches, face-to-face contacts, and then also running stores, running fitness expos, and then the actual running event website itself was about 21%. So by and large, they're really accessing social media to find out about these opportunities. And in fact, as you can see, nearly 2/3 of respondents turn to social media to learn about an event. And then almost everybody indicated that Facebook was the #1 place to go. Not surprising, I don't think. And then that was followed up by Instagram and Twitter, which were far lower at 39% and 27% respectively. So when you look at how they register, so they do their research, obviously, predominantly through social media and also the internet. But once that research is completed, it appears that nearly half register far in advance. Actually, 48% indicated that they registered at least 3 months prior to the actual event commencing. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So they not only research it, but then they take advantage of it to become involved. And then when you look at ways in which that they register for an event, I know there was some interest in people understanding whether they do it, by mail, desktop, laptop. By and large, it's from a desktop and a laptop at 80%, and that's followed by only 11% of folks that said that they register for an event via mobile device. So it's still the traditional means of registering for an event. And then once they do register, their preferred mode of communication from the actual event is via email. As you can see, 94%. And they don't really want to be contacted all that frequently, candidly. They want to hear from you as the event nears closer and closer.
Yeah, it's something to, as we put this into perspective here, basically using social networks to build awareness about the event, using call to actions through email as a way to register them going forward. Correct?
Yeah, correct. I think the distinction there is between being interest, as you said, and then taking it to action. And so as we look at different ways that they decide to participate in events, number one, 95% are really interested in the event distance, which we'll talk about also in just a second. But that seems to be the #1 motivation why they become interested in a particular event, followed by the cost of a running event. And so we just have to keep in mind that millennials are sensitive to cost of things because of their particular place in the workforce and student loan debt and things like that. And then that's further illustrated in subsequent slides. And so then when you look at events that have an impact on their decision to participate, you can see that sponsorship is really not of interest, and age group awards are really not of interest. And so those external elements that maybe in the past have been of importance don't really seem to be of importance to this particular sample. And so when we look at costs, as I said, I alluded to this with the previous slide, but out of all of the events, the #1 ranking price point was between $26 and $50. And so I think not surprising, right? Everybody wants the best event that they can have for the lowest price. But interestingly, I think because of, like I said, where millennials are maybe in their employment place, maybe they're entry-level employment and they have a significant amount of debt, which we know from the research, you can see that the lower price point is of interest. However, the only caveat that I'll point out, and then we talk about a bit in the report, is that once you get further distances, longer events, the marathon, for instance, they're increasingly more likely to pay more money for that. And so as we talk about at the bottom, what they're not willing to pay for, they weren't really interested in training groups, whether it be digital or in person, and they weren't really interested in running apps. They really want to be able to pay for a well-run event in the particular distance that they're interested in. And so really, I think the key takeaways for this is that you just need to understand that you want to leverage social media to attract their interest in an event, and then you will also want to use internet via traditional means once they have already registered for the event to keep them interested and activated, as Derrick said. And it's particularly important because the ways, if you understand the ways that they not only learn about events, but then the ways that they register for events, you can sort of target that to this particular population. And then lastly, as I said before, the #1 recommendation, I think, in the experience area is really to focus on offering lower cost, very high quality events, and then connect with communities of participants via social and digital media.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Thayer. So as Dr. Thayer had gone through both the health and fitness and the experience piece, a couple bigger things here. Basically, this running population, very into staying physically fit and healthy. Their experience is focused on those first and foremost, rather than some of the anecdotal components that might have been added to the events as well. And then lastly, as we see this, that we're using environments of social media and others to either have those conversations and use that discussion around physical fitness and being healthy and fit as also assisting them in their driving towards these events and activities through other traditional means. Well, as also part of this study, as we went forward, we wanted to understand the charity and philanthropy component, which has been a very big discussion for so many of the events. How much should we incorporate more charity and philanthropy, as well as how much should we incorporate volunteerism and so on. Historically, as we have been researching millennials here at Achieve, we have been looking at the millennial impact studies in which they have been analyzing millennial participation in social and cause issues. Of course, we all come with the assumption that because millennials are very cause enthusiastic and that social issues are of high interest, that would also translate within the running, race, walk environment here of the events. And so as we went out to test it, there were some unique things that we did discover. Nearly all of the millennial respondents that participated in a running event that supported a cause or a charity, almost all of them had done something in that realm, but the cause wasn't really the primary reason why they participated. It was a little bit something different and unique. It was the primary reason, as we talked about earlier, which is that being healthy and physically fit was definitely the highest piece on there. Now, again, let me remind you that this is for the particular audience that is those runners and that complete these types of events that we were discussing earlier. When we also think about the types of millennials that had responded in here, they may have participated in other instances like fun runs, as you saw earlier. We had 23% that have participated in those. And for that particular piece, it might have been something that they had an interest in. However, when we look at this particular at the marathon, half marathon, and all the different types of events, the primary driver is not the charity or philanthropy associated with it. 86% have participated in a running event that supported a cause or a charity, and 58% were primarily interested in the event and not really that cause or charity it supported in general. And we started to hear that anecdotally a little bit in some free response forms about not necessarily this being as important, but yet it's nice to have there. And I think it's also something that we look at factors that make someone's decision happen, that charity and philanthropy is an important piece for a third, smaller than a third of them. But on its weight by itself, it's not as compelling as a health and fitness marketing call to action that you might want to do, or in essence, the event or experience that they might be a part of as well, where it might be unique different elements that are developed by the event directors and organizers that play into the health, fitness, and physical fit environment. In addition to that, we did see that 93% of the millennial runners give through the entry fee or part of it which supports the cause, rather than necessarily viewing an external or other opportunities to give. We do see this happen a lot. What we call this is the substitution effect, in which that the individual substitutes entry fee as also part of donation. We see that whether it's a millennial attending an art experience in which that ticket price is there, they also view that as a philanthropic contribution too as well. So when we see these kinds of things, it's not necessarily surprising. We've seen it before. Note that because there's not necessarily a high interest in the cause or charity part, continue to heighten that in the marketing piece may not drive as much. It will drive some with those that like it, but you're going to see more with the healthy fit and physical fitness experience. When it comes to volunteerism, we saw that about a little over a third had volunteered for a running event, and about 82% of them had volunteered by helping with tasks the day before the event in general. So overall volunteerism was lower than we had seen in other types of events historically, that through our other research that we've done, not necessarily in this one. What that also means is that not every millennial runner is ready to be your volunteer. So again, notice that the primary driver being the healthy fitness and physical fitness piece, where a factor 2 or 3 times down or less would be charity. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have influence. It's just not as a strong influencer with this population as with others. In addition, when we look at motivations for that volunteering, so right, that group that said that they're volunteering for these events, we notice, of course, very similar things that we notice across all of our other studies when it comes to social cause and issues, and that's passion for it, potential incentives, or in addition to that, some leverage here, as you've seen towards the end. So friend or somebody else, family member, maybe encourage them to volunteer. All 3 methods and approach have been useful, and that also could be coupled in some of your marketing. If you do find that charity is important for those, that 1/3 environment that we talked about, talking about that this is an opportunity for you to bring friends together, to have that networking opportunity. You might have an additional incentive for them to do, and that this plays into that this is a mission support type opportunity as well. So when we think about those motivations for volunteering of that smaller group that has that interest, try to play into each one of those from a marketing perspective. So our key takeaway in the philanthropy section overall is that cause is important, but not necessarily as strong as we see with being physically fit as well as being healthy. That's the primary driver for this audience to participate in the events that we're talking about. In addition, second, after being physically fit and healthy, is that experience that's going to be unique for them that they're not going to get with any other race, playing back into the healthy fitness and physically fit piece. Later on, the charity is there, and that could be an additional piece associated with it, but it's not going to be the primary driver. Very, very low, tertiary, third, really, out of all of those. In addition, we know that millennials are wired to do good. We can use some of this to leverage some of the population, but again, won't be the primary driver. I think as an event organizer, you have to look at it and say, how can we begin to create events that definitely heighten that experience, play into that primary motivator, but yet offer at times for those that want to experience cause and doing good through it too, at their own will, of course. So those three primary sections sort of lead us to our key takeaways and further recommendations. First and foremost, authenticity is key in the planning of events stage and area. When planning events in general, allocating time and energy, as we had mentioned, we see the run-up to when they actually are looking at and researching opportunities to the time that they're actually registering. As Dr. Thayer had mentioned, it's actually longer than we would have recognized in any other environment, including just direct donation or any call to action. In addition to that, again, play into the primary consideration of what they're wanting, these unique experience, beautiful settings that might occur, and you'll find more of that as you read the study in further detail. Run for running's sake. Quite honestly, that's probably the best way to sum up the primary motivator of what we're seeing with this particular demographic of millennial runners, those that complete. The event sponsor components, the value adds that you're trying to add into it is not as high as we've seen. As Dr. Amy Thayer had mentioned, there are apps, there's all these different environments that might exist. They're good. They're not going to be as necessarily driving the most attention and motivation from this population. So as event organizers, you'll have to consider what's more important, spending more resources and time on making the experience better without these, as well as bringing some of these in. Of course, also, and we've heard this in some of the free form responses early on, is making sure that they all align together. Why are you bringing in that event sponsor? Does it align with the physical fitness, healthy fit environment motivation that we're talking about? Or is it just, they gave you money and that's an opportunity to have them there? And then lastly, communicating with purpose, of course, as we say, connecting millennial runners. We know that the social network is going to be good to research. I would really heighten the way that you use communication through social networks, utilizing Facebook advertising, other forms of advertising as well, sharing stories of runners who have done something in the past with you that they can account for their story of how the event was hit into that primary motivation of being healthy and fit. So using social networks and social media, not just to tell them when the event is, but sharing stories of runners themselves will be very, very important. After the millennial runners have registered, really go back into the email. Consistently, we have heard across all of our other research an assumption that email is not a primary call to action driver for registration or anything else, or call to actions. And it's really not true. Not only with this study, but all of the other studies that we've conducted, we continue to see that email is the largest direct response that we're seeing happen with millennials. And it happened here as well in this millennial running study too. Provide the knowledge there of health and fitness and how each aspect of the event really hones in on that primary motivator. So, as I mentioned, this is just a quick overview of those key takeaways. Dr. Amy Thayer and I will both be available at the Running USA conference at the end of this week. We'll be presenting the full findings. There will also be a booth at Running USA where Dr. Thayer will be too, as well, mostly during that time. I'll be there, of course, on Friday to not only deliver the keynote, but also some of these key findings. In addition to that, if you do have any questions, as you took notes here, please feel free to respond to the emails that you get right after that. In addition, if you'd like to request an interview time with us, Dr. Amy Thayer or myself, we'll make ourselves available for those interview times. If you have any questions related to the data, you should have received the embargoed copy. If you haven't already, please do let us know as well, and we can provide this presentation for you to review too. For all of the research partners, we do want to thank you for attending today and being a part of the study. The next phase of the study will be a qualitative interview phase where we'll continue to validate this quantitative data that we have here. That will happen now and for the next 3 months, and then we'll release a report in about 6 months of individuals that have participated in the first phase of this work. So you want to make sure that you sign up for updates on the Millennial Running Study website if you haven't done so already. Again, thank you for the time today. We've recorded this. If you've missed anything, we hope to see you at the Running USA conference as well. Bye-bye.